The scene opens with a man at the research base holding a pistol. He walks out to see outside but suddenly starts screaming and shoots himself. Later we see Dr. Luther Swarn addressing the community of Global Summit Search Company. He is telling them about the upcoming plagues due to the ice melting in Antarctica. After the conference, his wife Jess comes to tell him about their anniversary. They are interrupted by Dr. Lansing, who tells him about the death of Dr. Versernus, who shoots himself earlier. Luther immediately calls his friend Mike and flies toward the Arctic. After reaching, Luther calls the coworker but no one is there. They start searching the area only to find blood on the floor and a biomass chemical. They come back and quarantine for some tests to ensure they both are in good health. 2 days later drive, Lansing comes and tells you both are clear to go home. Luther wants to run more tests but Lansing convinces him to go home. Mike is sitting in the bar. Suddenly his mind starts to focus on everything. Disturbed Mike quickly panics and rushes out. The next day Luther and Mike are eating. Mike tells him about the previous night's incident. Mike explains to him that he is sitting in the same bar and suddenly he is listing everyone's conversions across the room, and reading a menu 40 feet away. Luther tells him not to worry and says they'll run some more tests. In the evening when Luther is busy with his wife, Mike calls him for help. Luther quickly reaches the given address and finds panicked Mike in the room. Then Luther found a dead girl lying on the bed and tried to call the police. Mike tells him he didn't kill that girl and asks Luther for help. Luther asks him about the dead girl and Mike tells him that didn't remember what happened to him. After a short argument, Mike convinces Luther to help. The next day, Mike standing in the washroom suddenly remembers everything breaking the sink. Luther, on the other hand, decides to go to the police when his wife asks him about the last night. Later, when Mike is walking, he starts listening to people and reading words on a flying plane. Then he notices a girl. He sees blood pumping in her veins and starts chasing her. Luther arrives at the police station and tells Detective Yunov about the murder of the girl. Mike growls at the girl but the police come and shoot him down. At the station when Luther goes inside the cell to talk to him, Mike breaks his handcuffs and threatens Luther. He starts beating the policeman but they catch him and take him to the hospital. A young girl Kaylee, a journalist, comes to a hospital in a doctor's dress and goes into the Mike's room. She wants to ask him some questions related to his victims. Seeing her, Mike gets angry and changes himself into a vampire. Listening to her screaming, police rushes to catch him but he attacks on them, sucking the officer's blood. Dodging from the bullets, he jumps from the balcony and runs away. Luther begs from Detective to go home to save his family from Mike. As he gets back home he finds his son but his infected wife attacks the boy and Luther kills her, turning her into a human. Police come to the scene and arrest him while he is just looking at his dead wife. At the police station, Luther tries to convince the detective, tells him to ask his son about the murder. On the other hand, Mike kills people without showing mercy. The TV reporter Kaylee goes inside Luther's house and finds a picture of Luther and Mike. Luther is taken by the Department of National Security where Agent Claire asks him about recent incidents. On the other hand, the virus is quickly spreading around the town and turning people into vampires. Luther tells Agent Claire about the virus's effects and also tells her it is spreading slowly. When she shows him pictures of dead victims, Luther agrees to help and in return he wants them to remove all charges and his son back. Agent Claire sends him to scientist Niklos. He shows sympathy for his dead wife. Luther tells him that in my working theory, this virus is an ancient form of prion, isolated in biomass, and got into me, my wife, and Mike. After listening to Luther, Niklos tells him they need his help and that these infected horrible creatures are an existential threat to humanity. Luther meets with his son before agreeing to help them. Mike sits with a blind woman who is waiting for her ride. He looks at her blood-pumping veins and controls his emotions. They talk for a while and Mike tells him that he lost his brother, Luther, and thinks he betrayed him. Soon her ride arrives and Mike leaves from there. On the other hand, when Luther was talking to his son, Dr. Nicole's talking on the phone with high authorities and keeping an eye on Luther. In the next shot, a couple of vampires attack a family and kill them. In the lab, Agent Claire announces on TV about Michael Fayen and declares him a serial killer, but Luther disagrees with this. Some of the gang members reach the home of their buyer and find dead bodies. One of the bosses takes money and wants to kill their own member who is a vampire now. Teresa, Luther's colleague, arrives in the lab and meets with Luther. Luther tells Dr. Niklos he wants to go outside to find Mike and tells him only a lab search is not enough. He says Mike is the only one who can help us to make a cure. Moments later, Luther reports to Dr. Niklos and tells him that this virus changes the junk DNA system of humans. At night when Luther is working, a DNS officer calls him and informs him about the location of Mike. They rush toward the location and on arrival, they find no one but a dead woman lying on the ground. Kaylee takes an interview of Luther's ex-wife and his son's real mother. While Des was listening to her interview, she was saying that Luther is the friend of a serial killer and my son is not safe with him anymore. In the conference room, Agent Claire arrives and gives Luther only 24 hours to get Mike, otherwise he'll be in jail for his entire life. Mike runs into the woods with his injured shoulder and gets inside a house. Luther finds him at the fishing yard and tries to convince Mike to surrender. Mike refuses his offer, telling him that he did not believe in the government, saying they will kill him. While they are talking, a sniper appears and aims at Mike, but he is killed by another vampire. Mike hears a gunshot and again takes Luther as a betrayed friend. Mike meets a girl named Ava, who kills the sniper. Ava introduced another infected person to Mike, who calls themselves Blood. She tells him, "We are a new species and some of us are in danger." They make Mike their leader. Luther comes back to the lab, telling her, "You start a war now." Ava kills a guard, ripping his heart out of his throat, and then Mike and other vampires come to join the party. Luther with the Department of National Security arrest vampires. In the van she attacked them, killing them with speed. She comes to Luther but is interrupted by a biker gang. They shoot her but she escapes. Later Mike sends a video message to the government saying that they are humans and we have the right to live. They will fight through their blood nation even if costs more human lives. Luther figures out about Dr. Niklos and his team conspiracy that after finding the predator gene, they will kill him. After that, they will quarantine infected victims and kill them. So, Luther, Teresa, and Des decide to leave. Luther finds his son's DNA matches Mike's DNA, shocked starts crying. DNS caught Luther's son and took him to quarantine. Luther reaches to find his son in a quarantine area inside. A vampire attacks them but security guards come and aim a gun at Luther to stay away from the kid. Another man, a member of a biker gang, comes and frees Luther and his son. Luther meets with the senator. She asks him about his experience on the situation. He tells her that the prion virus is spreading very quickly and there is no cure. The senator tells him that their team creates artificial blood which will help them to stop vampires' hunger. Luther files a case against the DNS and tells the judge in court that DNS is looking for a cure for the disease, but rather finding and imprisoning turned humans, and their only goal is to kill them. Senator sends Luther to negotiate with Mike. On reaching there, he asks Mike to stop killing humans and in return, they will provide you with artificial blood for survival. The next day Senator also goes to meet them and they decide to fight against DNS. On the other hand, Dr. Niklos inject himself with prion. Luther and the senator hold a press conference and tell the public that in order to get out of these crises, they have created artificial blood for vampires. Ava argues with Mike that humans are not able to trust, but Mike tells her that Luther gives him his words and he has to keep his trust in him. While Mike sits outside, another vampire attacks him, but Ava reaches and kills him on the spot. Luther goes to visit his ex-wife, where DNS agent arrives and tells him that everyone in the United States government has been evacuated. Ava rushes and tells Mike that rebel bloods blocked the area, somebody armed them with automatic RPGs. Ava brings them both outside and grabs Danica but stops her and says, "Let her go and do whatever you have to do with me." She takes Mike with her, and on the other hand, when Luther is with his son, DNS guards attack them, taking his son and shooting him. Dr. Niklos takes over on the vampires as their new leader. At the end, we see Luther is still alive and a girl named Verdeluk visits him and tells him that she saw his son in the vampire camp, which is heavily guarded. Luther looks at the Niklos picture and holds a gun. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to watch more videos like this.